You are going to be part of a UNSW panel on Monday discussing Australia's modern relationship with the Crown. How would you define that relationship currently?
Well, I think that the question, certainly by putting modern in it, narrows the issues, because I think generally when we have this conversation, we ask it as a general question: what is the Australian relationship to the monarchy? Which I think assumes a singular point of connection. Yet when we reflect more broadly, especially on First Nation people, I think if you ask the question from that perspective, it would emphasize different issues. So even when we speak of Australian modern connection to the monarchy, I think it's important that we still acknowledge that we are speaking from a place which views Australia identity more from the Anglo-Saxon perspective and the settlement of Australia 200 years ago or more. But I think even if we narrow the question to that issue, that it doesn't make it less complex. For example, Australia over the years have tried to move somewhat away to an independent identity. That's why we don't have a national anthem that is God Save the King. And even our honour system was amended to reflect a much more mature country, and perhaps a country that wanted its identity to reflect Australia today. So I think really the tension is, what should we be as a country currently when the British monarchy, the British Empire and British identity no longer have the strong connection that they do in a country like Australia, whether it's because of multiculturalism or otherwise.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time that we're living in now, having this particular conversation as well. But beyond the symbolism, what do you think breaking away from the monarchy would mean for the Australian identity?
Well, I think, as you mentioned beforehand, I have to admit my bias. I am a Republican and not in the American kind of way. And so I do think that a robust, for Australia to have a robust national identity, one that takes account of its migration history, one that truly acknowledges 60,000 years of Indigenous people present on this land, that we have to sever this almost psychological need to be anchored to symbolism and myth that no longer serves us. You know, I don't think that severing those ties politically or constitutionally necessarily means that we will have no relationship as a country with the United Kingdom. Of course, we would. There will always be historical ties and there will always be strong relationship with those countries. But I think it shifts our attention when it no longer becomes the only source or the main source of driving our character as a nation. It allows us to look, for example, to where we are located geographically and ask, what could Australia present look like where we are, not just in a matter of the 21st century and the complexity of that, but geographically where we sit in the Pacific area.
Okay, but then you do have a cohort of Australians whose culture, whose identity, whose history and loyalty would also be tied to the British monarchy. What would their role be in the shaping of Australian identity going forward?
I think that's an important question. I think it's important that we pay respect to people who see that connection as important. But I think merely maturing and becoming a country that is able to craft its own identity going forward is not rejecting history entirely, because that will always be our history. There is no way that that's not going to be part of our Australian history. So I think we can honour both, but in a way that doesn't narrow our perspective of our nation or anchor us to things that are tremendously, maybe to some degree, outdated.
You know, Nigel, there's been a lot that's been discussed about the impact of colonialism that the British Empire has had. And Indigenous leaders from around the world have asked King Charles III for a formal apology for the transgressions of the British Empire in the past. Do you think that's enough to placate the hurt, the trauma that has been held by many peoples who've had to suffer under colonialism?
I don't think it is, right? But I think it's a start. I think they've asked for it, and I think it would be a great gesture if indeed the British monarchy believes in this idea of a commonwealth and a common destiny, right? It would be a kind gesture if they do. However, you do notice, and I think it's quite a contradiction, that on the one hand, when indigenous people demand for that apology or reparation, we are told that that's the past. Yet we are celebrating the past. I mean, and so it to me, it's revealing of the disparity in the relationship. It is still a one-sided relationship. It is still not a relationship of equals. And I think that's why the question of a republic is important. It attempts, at least, to equalize the relationship so that we're not partners, so that we are partners, not subjects.
That is intriguing indeed. So much to discuss, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Nigel, lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Nigel Nguyen there, thank you.
Thank you.